Hello, my name's Frances. Like Dr. Hassel said, I would like to start, Harriet and I went to the Philippines last summer to conduct some ethnographic research. And to start with, can we just say thank you to SOLACE for including student exchanges and field trips in the SOLACE project. And thank you to the Global Challenges Research Fund and the UK's Arts and Humanities Research Council, and also a big thank you to the Medical Research Council for funding this fantastic research. So thank you.
Good afternoon, my name is Harriet, and it was a really great opportunity to be able to go to the Philippines so we could see global health in practice. We hope that by sharing our stories we can enthuse some more medical students to get to take part in some global health competitions, and I know that Lisa is really keen for these to continue, so please, if you have any questions, please do go and have a chat with her at the end or in the break.
Okay, so Harriet and I travelled to the Philippines last summer to do ethnographic research in northern Samar and learn about the local communities and the healthcare system. So although we're both medical students, Lisa, who's an anthropologist, gave us a crash course in ethnography to prepare us for the trip. So thank you, Lisa, again. Harriet and I flew to Manila, where we met Danny and Sai, who you can see on the slide, our other ambassadors from Ateneo de Manila University. And we spent the first 2 days exploring the campus there, which was lovely and really nice to meet them and find out a little bit about their university. The picture on the right was taken inside their church, so it was really interesting learning about their religion while there as well. We then flew to northern Samar, where we spent 10 days. Harriet was based in the Rural Health Unit, which she will discuss, and I was based in the Barangay or Village Health Post, which I'll talk about. We also spent a few days on an island, which showed us both the health barriers that more remote GEDA communities face, as Matthew discussed in his talk. And we finished the trip with a lovely day in Manila with our ambassadors.
Okay, so as Frances said, I was based in the Rural Health Unit for most of my time. I normally spent the mornings taking the vital signs of patients, so this is things like their temperature, their heart rate and their blood pressure. And it was when I was listening to the heart rate of a little baby girl that I noticed she was breathing really loudly and that her lungs were crackling when I checked her chest. This was the first time I'd heard this, but I'd been told about the signs of pneumonia. So I called over a nurse and she confirmed what I'd thought. To me, this little girl seemed too young to have an infection, which personally I associate with ill, elderly people who are in hospital. But the local health professionals explained that it was her living conditions that had put her at risk. So I later found out that Europe has one of the lowest incidence of childhood pneumonia, whereas the Philippines is listed by the World Health Organization as being in the top 15 countries with the highest numbers of new cases. Whilst in the Rural Health Unit, I also felt the enlarged lymph nodes of a girl with TB, and I listened to the heart and lungs of a man who had schistosomiasis, which is a neglected tropical disease. Again, I was told that it was the living conditions such as overcrowding and poor sanitation of water that was the main causes for these illnesses to occur. But the Rural Health Unit was a really positive, a loud and a very busy place, and it was a good start to increasing the accessibility to medicine because all of the medication that it offers is free. However, I was told that quite often the medication could be out of stock, and in these cases the patients would need to go to the local pharmacy. But there they'd have to pay, and because of that it deters a lot of people from going to the Rural Health Unit in the first place. Particularly, as Ginger mentioned, the cost of travelling to a rural health unit can be difficult for some people to find. I found that the treatment for TB at the Rural Health Unit is free, and the barangay health workers are actually paid if they're able to pick up on somebody with TB and direct them to the unit. I was also lucky enough to observe 2 births whilst in the maternity ward of the Rural Health Unit. And this is a photo of us in the bottom right corner, having just watched our first mother deliver. That was a first-time experience for me, and I think Matthew as well. And it was definitely one of the highlights of my trip. So these photos show how the Rural Health Unit has been affected by the weather. So one time the rainwater was coming in through the roof as we had a big downpour, but the staff collected buckets and they put it under the leaks and they carried on working. The back of the Rural Health Unit suffered the brunt of the typhoon damage. For instance, the room in the top left corner was once the delivery room. However, this has now been moved to a smaller room at the front, replacing where the TB clinic was once held. The new delivery room has 2 beds, and next to these are a large medicine cabinet. But I later found out that pain relief is not included amongst the medicines stored in the cabinet. The photo of what looks like a house next to it was once the maternity ward, and mothers could rest here whilst they were in labour, and I was told that some could stay for several nights before they deliver. However, the smaller maternity ward doesn't permit this, because unfortunately it only has 2 beds, and there is a third, but that's kept in storage for the majority of the time. As the TB clinic is now home to the maternity ward and the delivery room, it has been moved to the corridor, as you can see in the bottom 2 photographs. There isn't much privacy, and the patients who are waiting to be seen could easily overhear. And while sitting in on consultations, I found that the doctor would often address those who are waiting as well as the person that they were treating. This type of interaction goes completely against everything I am taught here in Kiel. But arguably, the open discussions help to reinforce things that were being taught to the doctor amongst many people. However, I did feel that it did distract from the severity of some of the health warnings, for instance, when they were discussing the high alcohol intake of some of the patients. Okay, so here's some photos of us when we visited the island, and we stayed there for 2 nights. Here I met some women who describe themselves as midwives. However, they're not actually trained to deliver babies. Rather, their role is to help to transport women to the rural health unit, as delivering on the island has actually been made illegal due to the high rates of maternal and infant death. These women described scenarios to me where there was not enough time to reach the rural health unit, and they needed to help mothers to give birth in a stranger's house along the way. I was also told stories of women who were progressing into labour quicker than expected, and they did actually give birth on the island, only to then travel to the rural health unit to deliver the placenta and have the umbilical cord cut. As untrained women, I thought that they were incredibly brave, and they were told me that they were seeking some medical training for emergency scenarios such as these, and they were hoping to be receiving that soon. They also took me on a tour of the island, and around the harbour there were some larger brick houses, but as we got further away, the houses became more consistently made of leaves, and some smaller sort of villages appeared. This photo on the bottom was of a baby who had a rash on the back of his head. The mother told us that she couldn't take him to the rural health unit as she could not afford the cost of the boat ride. And it's common for the people who live on this island to then rely on herbal remedies from local plants. Everybody on the island were incredibly friendly towards me, and we were told that we were the island's guests, as opposed to just the guest of the nurse that we stayed with. They welcomed me into their homes, invited us to relax with them, and they showed me and allowed me to try some of their herbal medicines. They even went and got me some buka juice, which is the coconut water you can see at the top corner, when they heard I was feeling a little queasy. Okay, and these are just some photos I've put together from some of my highlights of the trip. Here's me and Fran in Manila, riding in one of the tricycles, along all the big vans, the buses, and all the heavy traffic, which was terrifying, but great fun at the same time. I had a 24-hour shift in the rural health unit, and afterwards we went to the beach where we had a party, some amazing food that was provided for us by Dr. Fonzie, and we had lots of songs and some dancing, and they were on the bottom corner for that. I also had a great time being taken around to try lots of the different foods that were recommended to me by the students from Ateneo University. I tried some cheese-flavoured ice cream, better than it sounds, it was really good. And I am a vegetarian, but I did dip my bread into the sauce of a lot of the beef teriyaki and things that they were ordering. And it was recommended to me that the bananas covered in pastry that are then fried and covered in sugar were the best, and that's something I definitely agree with. We also had a lot of mango mousse, which is quite a funny story, as we all turned up at the house of the woman who made it, thinking that it was a restaurant, but she invited us in, and all 13 of us ate it in her living room, and there we all are turning up to her surprise in the bottom right corner. Okay, I'm going to pass you over to Frances now, who's going to tell us a little bit about hers.
Thank you. Okay, so I was based in the barangay or village health post, and I shadowed village health workers, such as the lady on the top left there. And they told me about the prevalence of the non-communicable diseases, so things like diabetes, stroke and hypertension. And being in the barangay, I was able to see people in their daily routines. So as you can see on the slide, it could be that they were collecting water from the well, or they could be playing basketball, or maybe they were walking to school. And the people in the community were able to talk to us and welcome us into their homes and tell us a bit more about their lives. You can see in the bottom right outside of someone's home there's a chicken, and this was really common. At first I thought, why is there a chicken? But actually there was chickens and pigs everywhere, and these animals would often be food ultimately for the family. And this phenomenon of the family coming together for a meal is a very valued thing in the province, and it was wonderful to be invited to share in this aspect of their culture. So we also learned a lot about fiestas, as you've heard a bit about, where people in the community gather together and they enjoy lovely food, they celebrate, they have alcohol, they dance and they sing, and karaoke's very big over there, and Harriet and I got to dabble in that when we were there, couldn't get Harriet off the mic. So we loved that. And there's the picture, as Harriet described, of us having our own little fiesta at the beach on the last time in the province there, and we had lots of lovely food, and it was laid out on a big banana leaf, so that was wonderful. But while learning about their lifestyle and culture was fascinating and really enjoyable, understanding their diet and their health behaviours explained partly why some of the diseases are so common. So, for example, rice is a staple in the diet there, which the healthcare professionals often attributed to the high rates of type 2 diabetes in adult life. And a barangay health worker also said that after fiestas and particular feasts that are held throughout the year, people who are kind of borderline diabetic, it just would tip them over the edge and new cases of diabetes would emerge. Also, due to the consumption of alcohol at fiestas, there can sometimes be physical altercations between people, often men. For example, in the time that we were there, a man had gone into the hospital with an axe wound to the back of the head, and I was told that slashes, knife wounds and even gunshot wounds were common presentations at the hospital I visited briefly. You can see a sign in the top left there that says firearms or deadly weapons are not allowed inside. Please deposit your firearm to the guard on duty. I also was able to see a little bit about the way that socioeconomic and socio-political structures can impact health. So, for example, at the hospital, that same hospital, their surgical ward had closed due to a lack of funding, which meant that people had to go further for their operations. And interestingly, one nurse told me that sometimes if they need advice from a colleague about how to manage a patient, they'll send pictures via Facebook, because sometimes this can be better than the systems that they've got in place. Also, the same 2015 typhoon that had affected the rural health unit where Harriet was based had also destroyed the homes of many of the people I met in the village where I was based, with almost half of their houses around about there being similar to the one showed on the slides, predominantly made of kind of wood and large leaves. And one day a lady invited me into her house, similar to this, and inside, lying on kind of a wooden platform, was a middle-aged lady, younger lady, with her newborn baby curled up beside her, and the baby was coughing. And the more I talked to the lady, she said, I live here with my husband, who was a labourer, her son-in-law, and her other children. So there's quite a lot of people living in that house. And she said that she was saving up for somewhere bigger for the family to live, but as she explained about her income and her husband's income and their expenses, it started to become clear that any spare money they did have was not enough, and it would take years to be able to afford a new house. A large family size like that is quite common, and this overcrowding allowed the spread of diseases such as TB, like Harriet mentioned, and other things such as respiratory tract infections. And also the housing conditions themselves meant that when there was adverse weather, the family was more exposed to those fluctuations in weather, and the children, particularly the malnourished children, were at risk of developing pneumonia. So, which side are we on here? There we go. However, the health professionals that we met were very motivated and they're very optimistic for the future. We learned of a brilliant initiative called the 4Ps, Conditional Cash Transfer, and what that does is it aims to break the cycle of poverty by giving families money in regular instalments under the proviso that children get vaccinated, they go to school, parents attend certain things. Although I was chatting to some mothers one day and they said that they hadn't received the last few instalments of their 4Ps payment, and so they'd had to take out loans to buy a uniform for their children for school. And economic resources seemed to be a massive thing that influenced people's approach to accessing care, as Ginger discussed in her talk, and it seemed to deter them from going to the hospital unless it was something quite urgent. Someone said, people get very scared of going to hospital, not about the diagnosis, but about the cost. I thought that was very potent. And you can see I've included a sign in the bottom right there saying cashier, and that was in the hospital I visited. One person actually recounted a story where a man had fallen ill and had struggled to gather enough money together. It had taken him 24 hours to get the money he'd need to go to hospital, but by the time he eventually gathered the money and got there, he sadly died. So despite the challenges that the people faced, such as perhaps the lack of resources, the housing conditions, the extremes of weather that they were exposed to, everyone had a very positive outlook and a very positive energy, and the people were so kind and so generous. And it seemed that they found great solace in religion, and religious icons were very, very ubiquitous. So you can see the Santo Niño there, the Christ child, Jesus on the side of someone's home, and this was really common. And people also talked about the Holy Spirit as a protecting force as well. And there was such rich spiritual and magical beliefs as well. Obviously, Issa talked a bit about hexes and things like that. Learning about that was very interesting. And I was also advised not to walk over the roots of large trees because the souls and spirits of people who've passed on can live in these roots, and you could be possessed by them if you walked over them. And it was also interesting to learn about traditional healers. So I got to meet a healot who is thought to be blessed with an ability to heal muscle aches and pains. For example, if you're injured playing basketball, or if you strain your muscles at work as a fisherman or as a labourer or in agriculture. And a healer also very commonly delivered babies in the past. And she said to me, my hands are like stethoscopes. Interestingly, one lady had an enlarged thyroid in the past, and she was telling me a story about it, and her faith healer advised her to eat the head of a jellyfish, and it worked, and she no longer needed the thyroid surgery. So that was fascinating to me. And people also spoke about the healing properties of the sea. For example, if you had a tight chest, the sea air would relieve it, or you could go for a swim in the water to sterilise wounds, such as following circumcision. Or you could take a family member to the sea for physical rehab after they'd had a stroke to encourage the muscles to get going again with that bit less resistance that the sea would provide. And many people also told us about their use of herbal medicine, which I loved. I'd done my dissertation on it, and I was like, wow, I get to see this actually happening. Everyone had their own collection of medicinal plants, either in their garden or nearby. And the pink flower in the bottom right there was used to treat scorpion sting, we were advised, although we didn't encounter any scorpions. This knowledge seemed to be passed between generations, and it was also very common that if someone was unwell, you could recommend a remedy to someone and share plants with their neighbours, which was very nice to see. And it was such a close community, which they welcomed us into wholeheartedly. And this was what was really most inspiring about the experience, was the positive collective energy which was just flowing in the air. There was so much Harriet and I learned from this experience, and we hope you enjoyed this talk. It's just a snapshot of what we've taken away from this field trip in Northern Samar. We've also made podcasts, written blog posts, and created an experiential learning for other medical students, and this is all available on the SOLACE website if you'd like to have a look.
Yeah, thank you. One more little bit. I'll have my own clap after. This was such a wonderful experience to have as a medical student, to gain an understanding of cultural differences and how healthcare is delivered in other countries. There isn't a right or a wrong way to go about it, and it was insightful to have my mind widened by some of the things that I saw, such as the incorporation of the herbal medicine and the more open consultation style. It was so interesting comparing stories from medical school and hearing how differently Danny's curriculum is to ours, and the different diseases that she covers in Ateneo University in comparison to us. But also just trivial things about her university as well, like lectures being cancelled due to the rain, and the traffic in the university perhaps being so hectic it can take an hour just to get off campus. We had a fantastic time, and we gained so many unique and wonderful experiences. So I just want to say thank you to everyone who was involved, and just say that it's absolutely lovely to see some of our SOLACE friends here again today. Thank you.